who made sure that our streets were safe, allowed our multi-agency peacekeeping force on the streets to restore and start to restore order on our streets, making sure that those who earlier were able to peacefully protest were able to do that and return home, and those that meant to bring chaos were not allowed to do that. We know it's going to be a long night. It's early still. There's a lot of work to be done. I want to thank all those folks who are out there making sure that they maintain that peace that's expected of them. We're going to have a couple of briefs of active situation. We'll continue to brief you throughout the evening as the situation warrants. I'd like to put Major John Jensen of Minnesota National Guard up here.
Good evening, Major General John Jensen, the Adjutant General, Minnesota. We are in a position of strength significantly greater tonight in Minneapolis and St. Paul than we were last night. Currently ongoing missions for the Minnesota National Guard are 10 ongoing, with another 5 missions in planning stages and pre-execution. We're fully integrated and unified with law enforcement, fire, emergency management systems, and all of our state agencies to ensure the safety of our citizens in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding communities. We know there's a long way to go tonight. We're prepared for that. Your citizen soldiers stand fast to support the citizens of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Thank you.
Paul?
Good evening all. I'm Paul Schnell. I'm the Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Corrections. I'm currently assisting Commissioner Harrington, who is actively overseeing this, along with Colonel Langer from the Minnesota State Patrol. So I'm here to assist them tonight and give you a little bit of a briefing as to what's happening in the field. As you know, tonight, slightly before 8:45, officers went out and began to enforce the curfew that had been put in place by executive order and by mayoral order. That was decisive and strong. That will continue through the evening. That's exactly what was committed to as this operation began. There is a large presence of law enforcement from throughout Minnesota. They are being supported, as was mentioned by General Jensen, by the Minnesota National Guard. It's very early. We know that some of the groups that are here are in this for the long haul. And based on that, we know that it's early. We don't want to, get to a point now where we are really confident. We feel like we had a really good start to this operation. But the ultimate goal is, as was mentioned, first and foremost to preserve life, second to preserve property, and third to restore order in the city. There are a number of groups. This started out with one concentrated group, largely in the area of the 5th Precinct. That group was approached by law enforcement, resulted in some splintering of those groups, which was intended, and then there are a series of teams that are out and responding to spots where people may congregate. So right now, as I said, it's very early. There has been a number of arrests. I don't know the exact number at this point in time. It's a very fluid operation. I think as is known, the arrest operations are really at this time focused on those people who are found to be in violation of the curfew, as well as those who may be engaged in much more serious conduct. I am not at this point in time able to specify the exact nature of all the arrests, but the majority of them are for violations of the curfew. With that, I would just open it up for a few questions and go from there.
Commissioner Schnell, a lot of people are wondering, why didn't you do this 2 nights ago or last night?
Well, I think, as has been talked about a lot, that there has been, this started out as an operation. that was thought. We believed last night that there was adequate resources to address what was necessary. Obviously, it was inadequate, and as was directed by the governor and by the mayors, a large force was put together and established tonight. This large force is in place and will be here for the long haul to address and quell this situation, whatever that takes. We know this is, it's difficult. It's difficult to see a city in the position that it is. At the same time, I think there is tremendous, we're hearing from many people, tremendous relief that this action is being taken, and we want to get this addressed and be definitive about it. And again, I would just caution that it is early and we have a long way to go.
How many arrests have there been, and have there been any injuries either amongst those arrested and also especially on law enforcement and the National Guard?
At this point in time, there's been no reported injuries of consequence. We have, there are some people who have had complaints just around maybe being exposed to the gas that's been deployed in the areas, but no significant injuries reported.
And how about the National Guard?
No, none at this point in
And
time.
how many arrests have there been?
We don't know the exact number. Again, because of what the fluid nature of this, people are brought on to transport vehicles and then will be moved to booking locations.
And where are the booking locations?
We're not getting into the exact details of where that stuff will be taking place, but they will be transported from the arrest area off to another site for booking processing.
Commissioner Torres, the Star Tribune. One of Esme's colleagues was arrested and taken into custody, it appears, at WCCO. There's been other reports of journalists being shot at close range with tear gas when they're showing their credentials or rubber bullets. What is the direction for law enforcement at this time in terms of interacting with reporters who are credentialed and allowed to be out?
So, I think it's regrettable that those things happen. As I mentioned, one of the challenges that we face is that because of the dynamics of the crowd that we have, because of the groups, because of the tactics that they use. In some instances, they get close in to the reporters. It's difficult at any distance, as you've seen from the coverage, and is that there has been a lot of use of smoke devices, smoke grenades, and flashbangs. That also creates some challenges just with being able to see. Most of the officers are also masked, and so that makes it a challenge as well. A good number of the reporters are also masked for understandable reasons, but that also makes it challenging. So it's a regrettable situation, and one that we quickly, as quickly as we can, we want to get those people released, and that's certainly one of the reasons they were exempted was because we value and know the importance from a transparency standpoint. There's no secret about what's happening, and I think we've made that very clear throughout the day. I think the governor's expectations were laid out, and the officers went into this knowing that we wanted to restore order in the city. And again, we're not looking to have reporters in the mix, and certainly when that's determined, we want to get those people released.
Commissioner Schnell, Adrian Broadus from CARE TV. How do you plan to stop this organized group? It appears they're communicating with each other on Facebook, giving instructions. And based on what we saw on Facebook, that was playing out over in the 5th precinct.
We know that these groups are highly organized. We know that even as they get broken up or dispersed, that they establish kind of points of congregation, so they reconstruct themselves in the group and take action. But I think we have also been doing as much as we can in terms of tracking that activity. We, have tremendous resources and a lot of people on the ground. And to be frank, one of the most remarkable things that we've had, first and foremost, is incredible cooperation from a lot of people, from the vast majority of people who have stayed home. First and foremost. Second of all, I think there has been great high amounts of intelligence that's come in from people who are concerned about their cities and are reporting things that they're hearing or maybe seeing or on social media and elsewhere. And I think that really says something about Minnesota coming together, the city and people of Minneapolis wanting to make sure that this situation stops and that we can move forward. And so, we are doing everything we can to be on top of that. And we know that this will be a protracted night for certain. We know that we are far from out of the woods, and we're going to continue to work it.
Commissioner, just at the Lake Street Bridge and the Ford Parkway Bridge, where police seem to be pretty successful at keeping protesters from coming across. Maybe you addressed this earlier before I got here. Was tear gas deployed at Lake Street Bridge and/or Ford Parkway to stop those protesters? And how many of them were there? And Chief Axtell just said they had reports that they were headed toward the state capitol.
So what we do know is that there were at least one or two groups that were heading this way from various different directions. In the Joint Command Center, there has been communication and coordination with St. Paul, and certainly resources are going to be deployed to do everything we can to keep them from coming to St. Paul, and we will address those crowds. I don't know if that was happening as I was coming here for this briefing. I was listening to the radio, but I did not hear if there was deployment of gas.
Follow-up is, in terms of containing this on one side of the river or the other, is the Mississippi River a great tactical advantage given how few bridges there are where pedestrians can actually get across?
Well, certainly, but I think we know that things can pop up in a whole variety of ways. And so the officers are very mindful of that. The teams are mindful of that. St. Paul is, and these things are being tracked very closely. But that is certainly an advantage that we have. The fact that transportation, many of the routes, the more common routes, the freeways at least, are largely there's nobody on them, and so it's much easier to be able to identify people who may be coming here to do things that we shouldn't, and we want it, and we're going to address it. And I would just say again that the goal of this group and the goal of this team, an unprecedented volume of law enforcement and supported by the National Guard, are here, and this is, we are committed with whatever it takes to bring order.
Commissioner Schnell, there have been repeated statements at earlier news conferences by the governor and also by Commissioner Harrington that last night you were simply overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of people out on the streets. What are the numbers like tonight? Because the images are so different and so starkly different.
I think we've not done hard crowd estimates, but I can tell you that when we saw the numbers of the people that congregated near the 5th precinct, that number appeared quite a bit smaller than certainly we saw last night. And we think that I think that's a real testament to the message that has been delivered throughout the day by the governor, by the mayors, by the faith community leaders. And I think people have really taken that to heart, and I think it's an incredible testament. And yet many of the people that are out there are obviously at this point in time their purposes are no longer for any good. They are out there in many cases at a minimum to create disorder. And we think in some cases their intentions are far greater than that. And so, again, we're committed to bringing this to an end.
Commissioner, we've seen some video of officers clearing a street, a residential street, some people standing on their porch. The officers approach them, tell them to get inside, and then hit one of them with a marker round in the leg while they're standing on their front porch. I know the message has been to stay home, but there seems to be some difference about whether you're in your home or whether being out of your home makes you subject to, use of at least semi-force here. What are you telling people? Can they, if the police see them out of their house, are they subject to this kind of action?
But I think here's the challenge that the teams are facing, Tim, as you know, they get into these situations. It's in the cover of darkness. It's really difficult to see who's who. Are these people that are running from or fleeing from police? Are they going up onto people's porches? And that has been, in fact, some of the things that people have been doing. And so those things do happen. That is not the intent. We're not out there trying to have that happen, but it does happen. And it's regrettable. And I think it's one of the challenges that officers face. I think, some of the news footage earlier tonight, as we think about what those teams are up against, and certainly what the city of Minneapolis and even St. Paul a couple days ago saw with people, with Molotov cocktails and those sorts of things. These are real threats and real hard and challenging, difficult situations. And while we do not want there to be collateral harm, we know that can happen, and it's regrettable. And when good people get caught up because they're on their porch or on their front steps, and they get hit by marker rounds, we apologize for that happening. But I would just say that we really would encourage, when they know that law enforcement is in that area, that it's really important that they shelter inside. Because I think at the same time, they don't know who may come in with them. They don't know who may access their homes. And at this point in time, I think people have to, based on what's happened over the last several days, expect and consider that anything could happen.
An overwhelming number of people are asking, why didn't you deploy troops earlier during broad daylight when this group was starting to move in? Around the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock hour, some of the peaceful protesters near the Wells Fargo and the 5th Precinct kind of left the area, and this group started to move in.
I think that the challenge is that really our authority around enforcement really began at 8 o'clock tonight, and based on that, I think the governor, the mayors were crystal clear that they wanted to provide people with the space and opportunity to come together. They wanted them to have the opportunity to express their opinions, their beliefs, to speak out. And we wanted to make sure that we were ensuring and protecting that. Now, that comes with some consequences, because as you point out, many of those people who they leave and leave some of the people who are around whose intentions are not the same. That said, I think, as was pointed out, the crowd was substantially smaller than it was before, and the teams did a great job of moving them along.
Commissioner, we're hearing reports of looting and incidents outside of the metro area, specifically in Buffalo, the Fargo-Moorhead area, and Duluth. Do you have any information about that?
I don't, but we can try and get information back out to you. We are tracking things in other parts of the state. We know that there has been smaller kinds of protests or threats of protest in some other areas, but I don't have any information about that specifically.
Commissioner, any update on the threat of the state capitol? Everything been pretty quiet there?
It has been quiet. The Capitol and many other sites that are believed to be critical infrastructure around the metro area are certainly on the radar. And so, we have been watching these activities on a regular basis, and we'll continue to do that.
So the governor has talked a little bit about federal resources, discussions with the Department of Defense. KSTP is reported that the 82nd Airborne is staged for deployment. Any indication that they're coming? That the MPs are coming? Any update on what the federal status is here?
I think really tonight's operation, as was pointed out by the governor and others, is unprecedented in our state, and there's no doubt that it can be a bit troubling to see. At the same time, this is what has to happen. It has to happen, and we believe that there is a force that has been put together of law enforcement from across our state, and as well as who are being supported by our citizen soldiers and our National Guard. And we believe at this point in time that these resources are adequate. The governor will, as he said, do whatever is necessary to protect Minnesota. But at this point in time, these teams are out on the street, and will continue to work hard and aggressively to bring this to an end.